Jim, I have a question. This probably is more for Mr. Marcus. Let's just say that their fantasy of no dioxins is true. I mean, they say that that's just not going to be part of it, that they can get 6,000 tons of trash a day. What's the possibility when you try and build something that's, 1,400 times more stuff than ever been done before? I mean, a huge difference as to what they've done on a very smaller scale in a very limited time period. What's the possibility that you think that this monstrosity, I mean, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and if it would work, I'd be all for it. But the possibility of building something that big, plus, what's the possibility you think of somebody really wanting, I mean, there's fools all over the world wanting to put money into all kinds of crazy things, but do you think they really could get funding for it, and could it get built, and could it get built in that time period?
I don't believe that there are enough fools in the world for this particular project, but But of course, we never should be disappointed by the number of fools that actually do exist. I don't see this as a viable project. And even if there are assumptions about there's no dioxin and such, to go up, and again, I don't have an engineering background, but I know from studying economics and the way companies behave, to go up from a very small scale operation to a very large scale operation is something that takes sometimes generations to be able to do. The Wright brothers did not start with a 747.
I have a question.
Yes, I have a question.
I'm sitting here with Carl Simons, Mr. Railroad, and he brought up a point, and I'm going to bring it up for him because he's not going to. There's a lot of cost involved in this whole process other than just building a plant. He's a railroader. He remembers years ago when they brought trains loaded with tanks of garbage from New York City on the way to Nevada. Some of them, 100 cars would be coming through town. Now, we got a railroad yards that is old as can be. Who's going to pay to update these railroad yards? There isn't any, I don't know how many cars there's going to be on these trains bringing in all that trash. We don't have probably even that much good track up there more at 18th Street. So that's another side effect as far as cost to the community or to the railroad companies or somewhere. There's going to be other additional costs other than just building that plant.
But the railroad would want a contract that said that somebody's willing to pay for the delivery of so many cars per day or per week or per month to Logansport, Indiana. And that contract would have to be signed again by someone, and who's likely to be the person signing it is Mr. Canterbury or one of his agents. It has to be that way. If it isn't that way, then you're stuck with it. And I don't think that's what you want.
And of course, there's an alternative, which, most facilities like this get their waste imported by diesel trucks. And there's a lot of concern about not just the truck traffic, especially on small rural roads, but the emissions from diesel trucks are universally acknowledged to be a massive health and pollution problem, and they emit everything from particulates and benzene to dioxin. And so if you look at most government agency websites, and in fact our organization, we work with truckers and companies and government agencies collaboratively to figure out how to get cleaner vehicles and all that. But so maybe if the rail option didn't work, maybe they go to plan B, which is a few thousand diesel trucks a day rumbling into your town. I don't know.
Well, then we can always come by barge up the Wabash River.
But again, the question raises very good questions that I think the high-paid consultants should have raised. And I don't know that they did, but I certainly haven't heard about it.
I have a question, which I believe I know the answer to after listening to your presentation. A letter was printed in the local paper recently in which the author said, and I quote, "There will be no oxygen used in this process." And I'd like clarification from you. Is that still not true?
It's just as not true as an hour ago when I pointed out that their own document says that there's oxygen in the stuff coming out of that first stage. And if you do the math, it's 20% of what's coming out is oxygen, which is more than enough to make dioxins. And the second stage, where they're actually combusting those gases, there has to be oxygen. That's how they do combustion. You can't really burn things very well without that.
I notice some of you have to leave, and others have full bladders, but if you're leaving, please put your name on the mailing list out there for email so that you can continue to stay in touch with this project. I'm sorry, where's the next question?
When you parse through the documents, they say they need 6,000 tons per day, but don't they have to sort through that so they'll actually need more than 6,000 tons to come into the town?
That's a really good point.
And then some of that will have to go back out or to the landfill because they can't burn everything. So.
Right, and I haven't seen, maybe others have, I certainly don't know everything about the proposal, but certainly one of the things I noticed about their response, their 20-some-odd page response to the request for proposals left out a whole lot of things, and it wasn't just the emissions information or energy generation, but it was things like you raised, like, you know, how's this actually going to work, and what happens if the equipment breaks down. But certainly, a facility doesn't have on hand just 1 day's worth of waste. So what's the storage plan, and how? That's a lot of garbage, you know. So that's a really good question, and I haven't seen an answer, but it's again another excellent question.
Okay, so you're saying this is 10 to 15 times larger than the largest pyrolysis plant in the U.S., and that Harrisburg went bankrupt due to it. So is there anyone we can talk to that's looked back after 10, 20 years and said, you know, that was a good idea. I'm glad we built that.
Yeah, clarification. There has never been and is not any commercial pyrolysis plant in the United States that treated garbage or any other waste on a commercial basis. None. The one that I mentioned in Romoland, California, was hoping to be that. And rather than go through a public process, literally, they brought the equipment into this community and then tried to get permits and started test burning. And got a test permit, but could never get the commercial permit. So there's been nothing success, you know, that's happened here. This facility, the pyrolyzer plant, as proposed by them, would be 162 times larger than their largest reference facility, which never even reached the 37 tons per day. And it would be 1,500 times larger than their pilot plant at the undisclosed location. That's whose location is redacted in their proposal.
I have a comment.
Sure.
That I don't know how many people have ever been out to landfill, either the one that we have now or the one previous on the other side of the street. But I had several times went out there, and the rodent population out there is atrocious. So I can only imagine at the landfill we have now, they continually covered up. I remember the one previous to that, and they didn't. There were rats out there as big as dogs. And I'm not kidding you, because I used to go out there and shoot them with a rifle. But if we got piles and piles of rubbish and garbage and trash, just think of the rodent population you're going to have out there, out in the country. And all the neighbors around there will just love to have them as neighbors. That's my comment.
Good.
Yes, gentlemen, and in particular, Mr. Marcus, in your discussion with
Gentlemen and Mr. Marcus, that's a very interesting.
Oh, you're funny. In your discussion with the members of the council and city officials, was there a discussion about the need for a performance bond as a part of the contract? And can you give the people here tonight an idea of what kind of a performance bond might help to flush out the fact that this company is proposing a project that it's not capable of delivering on?
Well, I think the words speak for themselves, that the idea of a performance bond is that the company would have to buy what amounts to really a sort of an insurance policy that says we will perform this activity or we forfeit this amount of money. Now, there was no discussion of that at my table at lunch. I don't know whether there was discussion at your table. So the answer to your question is no, there was no discussion of that. That's another one of the very realistic issues that has to be brought up, and that's why the transparency issue is important. That's why having large numbers of people talking about this at the barber shop and the hairdresser and every place they go would be very helpful.
One of the reasons why Harrisburg ended up bankrupt is because they failed to get a performance bond on the company that didn't do the rebuild correctly. It still would have gone bankrupt anyway. I want to be clear about that. That was very clear in what I presented. But they had to have, since their authority didn't have the credit rating to do this, they had to have the city guarantee the bond. And since the city's credit rating was in the toilet too, they had to have the county be an extra backup in case the city went bankrupt. And so you had a whole string of public entities that ended up having to pay that tab. And I would be surprised if they find all the private financing they need and don't end up coming and asking for public bonding here.